Welcome back to the Subconscious Mind Mastery Podcast. Thomas Miller. We are going to roll right in, as promised, to part 2, talking about this, what has happened in churches with these pastors tumbling to not only moral failure, but criminal moral failure involving children. What's going on here? In the last episode, we talked about the control element of the whole system of this patriarchal religious control, and how the sky is indicating that that is tumbling. The second point that I wanted to make here is about the judgment and the condemnation. I just laugh. Whenever you see a picture of a Baptist, well, not whenever, not every time, but often when you see a picture of a Baptist preacher, there's a Bible and then they're pointing out to the audience. And boy, my dad always had the line, you might have heard this growing up, when you point your finger at somebody, you've got 3 pointing back at you. I have found this to be so consistently true that when you put somebody else under the microscope, you put somebody under your own judgment, usually that's a boomerang. It will come back and get you. There's just something karmic about that. So the focus on judgment and condemnation as the second point of putting this together of what's going wrong here. We were examining this not from the perspective of making it wrong. It's what is happening here. We're dissecting, we're unpacking what's broken because we want to live on the other side of this. We don't want to be trapped, and we want to examine ourselves to make sure that we're on a good path for ourselves and that some of this hasn't rippled in, because it does ripple into cultures and families and homes and etc. So I mentioned in the last episode, somebody said to me as I was transforming my life, what if there was no sin? What if there was no such thing as sin? What if sin was created in order to control? So I got to thinking about this, and basically, at least for the New Testament perspective, the post-Christ era, goes back to Constantine at 325, the Council of Nicaea, when basically they put the Scripture together as it is now. There are some accounts of what happened. Most of the accounts are authorized by the Roman Catholic Church. So really it's the Church's perspective of what happened historically. Bottom line, nobody was there who has any connection to today. None. But one thing we do know is that prior to the 300s AD, there were not many original manuscripts in existence. Now, this is talking about the 4 Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, John, and basically the letters of Paul. That's mostly the New Testament. There were a few documents, not a lot. After the 300s, there was an explosion of documents. We know today, because some of these have been discovered in caves and Dead Sea Scrolls, etc., that there were documents that were original back to that day, that era, that are not included in the canon of the New Testament today. Why? What has been tampered with? Now, something else we know, I think pretty well from history, from secular history, is that the Roman Empire basically controlled the entire region of the Mediterranean, and it was in decline by the time of Constantine. I'm not going to go into the merits of him, but by history attributes the year 476 AD, so another 150 years after the Council of Nicaea, is officially when the Roman Empire ended. So one thing Constantine probably was dealing with is with a lack of money, with disgruntled, controlled countries, and with a military that was in decline. When he saw the structure of Christianity, could it be? I don't know. But I'm looking at how do you get from here to here? Could it be that he saw something that he could control a population without a military? And there was enough there from those original documents to say that if we told you, if we created something called hell, and we told you that unless you come to us, the church, which is exactly how it was set up, last rites in the Roman Catholic Church, your gateway to purgatory instead of to the other place. But that costs money, and you have to have a priest. I mean, come on, what is this? Seriously, people believe this. Well, let's say that Constantine grabbed onto this and said, well, wait a minute. If we tell people that their soul is going to go to hell if they do not do what we, the church, say, we can control the whole thing. And that's exactly what happened. I mean, that was the fallout. That's what stretched it out another 150 years. By then, the magnitude of the machine, the political machine of the Roman Catholic Church, was well established. It wasn't until the early 1500s when Martin Luther tacked his thesis of 95 points on the door of the Catholic Church in Germany. The Roman Catholic Church had become massively corrupt between the 400s and the 1500s. All Martin Luther did was spread it out. Now there's multiple Protestant denominations that broke away, but they're only really about 10 degrees away because they still, from the Roman Church, because they still tell you that if you don't believe in the message that you're going to go to hell. It just rehashed the hash. Now let's put our eyes of energy on this again. Let's look at this through the levels of energy like we talked about last time. Fred Dodson's book that I did the audio book, through that lens. What is sin? Is sin a high vibration thing or is it a low vibration thing? Obviously, it's a very low vibration existence, reality. What happens when you focus on something? What does it do? What you focus on expands. So if the church focuses on sin as the crux of everything, then what do you think is going to expand within the church, just purely from an energetic perspective? Sin. Sin expands in an environment where sin is focused on. And you say, well, what about the people who murder and steal and lie and cheat and all of this? Isn't that sin, Thomas? I would ask, isn't that low energy? It's a choice. I guess you could say sin is a choice. What we're doing with sin is we're categorizing it so that you can be controlled by it. Because now you need something outside of you to forgive you for your sin, for your very nature of choice. In other words, you chose on your own volition to commit a crime. Are you not, as a human being, born with choice? So you exercise your very nature, and now the church says the only way that you can rectify that is forgiveness. What if you took a different perspective and you said, okay, I've been caught in this crime. What am I going to do? I want to clean my life up. I want to change. There's a debt owed to society. So you pay that debt for a few years in the sandbox, off to the side. Now you get out of prison. What are you going to do? You have new choices ahead of you. While you were in the sandbox, you learn about high timeline living, high energy, high vibration. And you say, when I get out of prison, I'm going to choose love. So you become involved with an organization that actually helps people who are the victims of the crime that you committed in the first place. You give back in a way that counteracts the karma of what you created by the crime. So now you're doing good works, you're making good choices, you're hanging around with different people, and your life takes on a whole new trajectory. And maybe in that group, as you are serving or helping other people who you once hurt, there's somebody who catches your eye, and you begin to talk, and then you begin to date, and that leads you down the path to a family, and now you have another choice. Am I going to be a man of integrity or a woman of integrity in this new relationship? Another choice. And you look at the timeline and you say, I can go to the dark side that a lot of these pastors are choosing, or I can choose a life of integrity. You give your password to your phone to your spouse. You share an email. You keep no secrets. Where is sin in all of this? It's a matter of making different choices. But does some church have to tell you that, oh, now you're okay because you conformed to some 5-page document like we talked about last time, or some code, or some system of, oh, here's how you get clear because this is what God established? There's a very brilliant astrology writer who is very difficult to read. Her name is Liz Green. She's British, but she's very deep. And she thinks that a lot of the Bible basically is mythology. It's basically a mythological, just like Greek and Roman mythology. It is a way of using stories to express concepts of the culture at that time. I mean, she's a brilliant lady. Don't throw her out so quickly. What if she's right? What if there was no this? Take the flood, okay? Noah and the ark. There is a flood story in every major culture on the planet. And there's a Noah figure in most of those stories of those cultures. In other words, different lenses on the same event. Likely there was a worldwide flood. Different cultures told the story differently. But remember, we're examining this because, as we established in the first episode, something here is broken. What is it, and how are we going to fix it? So this fixation on sin, I think, is another part of what's broken, because energetically it takes us to a controlled, from last time, perspective of behavioral performance. But I'm advocating that this environment of this excessive judgment and control makes it fertile for hypocrisy. I mean, this stuff is everywhere. And by the way, for you women who have had to deal with an onslaught of being hit on in all kinds of slimy ways, I am so sorry that you've had to go through this. It's in every office. It's everywhere. And I am here to say that I think maybe somehow some of this will change to higher ground. Here's one that I'm not going to go into, but you could ponder on it yourself, is if we were all living as a culture in our highest timeline, if love truly prevailed, if we gave others proper respect, if we just lived a life of love, in that culture, how would we handle these human desires that we all have to reproduce, to continue the species? How would we do it differently in that context? Think about that. How would men be different? And how would women be different? It's really interesting to think about when you also take into consideration the human needs. What do men need and what do women need? And how would those needs be met and fulfilled in a high timeline society? I can tell you one thing. I'll stop here. We wouldn't make those needs wrong. We would manage them differently. And living like that, isn't that what the crux, the good part, the good message of the Bible and Christ likeness is all about anyway? Did we so taint the real message that we've forgotten it? Here's my third point on this, and I really got this after my cousin Lynn passed, and after thinking about just I had come out here. One of the big tipping points of the decisions of coming out here to the West Coast was that I finally would live in close proximity to my cousin Lynn, and I would get to enjoy being with her more. And that was taken away. And then after thinking about all the craziness in the world today and all the battles and all the setbacks, I literally, here's what I put in my notes. What the hell is this really all about anyway? And look, don't we all go through that sometimes? I thought about, all this stuff, these pastors, this Bible message being plastered across every headline of these people violating, child porn is what they're doing, basically. And I thought all of this, God created the heavens and the earth. God so loved the world that he gave his only son. When you really get down to it, earth is a cruel place. I watched my friend Cheryl in Florida die a very painful death. What about when parents lose their children? The violence, the murder, the stealing, the cheating, the lying. This is the human experience? I walked in about a little over an hour after Lynn had left us. I'm sure she buzzed my car driving down the interstate on the way to see her. And I told her daughter, we were both alone, everybody had left, we were there. And I said, look at your mom. I said, she is so peaceful in her expression. She just went to sleep. They said there was nothing happened. She just stopped breathing And the expression on her face was one of rest and content and just peace. And I thought, her soul is so gone. Lynn is gone. That body that is lying there is the expression of Lynn on this planet. And now, as she took her last breath, she was in peace. And it hit me very clearly that she, Lynn, my cousin, is now free of all of that stuff I just listed. She is free. Her body, probably by now, has been turned to ashes. So what do we need to be focusing on anyway here? And I hope and pray, and I firmly believe that we are on the cusp of a new awakening. And I hope that this new awakening and whatever is on the other side of it is so comprehensive and complete that it literally changes the fabric of how this existence operates. Because it's not about following a decree, giving homage to a corrupt elder board, or signing some 5-page document surrendering all of your personal freedom to somebody else. What if this change coming makes it popular to choose the highest timeline for everybody? I mean, now if you don't cheat and lie and steal and all that stuff, first of all, you don't make corporate profits. But what does everybody say? Oh, everybody does that. Everybody. Well, what if everybody chose the highest timeline and guarded that so carefully that anybody who didn't was quickly like, oh, I mean, it would be so big of a deal that you'd have to conform just to be popular, to be in. Think of how something like that would completely transform this human experience. And I know some of you are saying, yeah, but that's not why we signed up to come here. Oh, okay, I get it. We're not going down that. What I'm trying to do is raise the vibration. Because this I do know, that if I stand for that kind of living, and if I live my life as best I can, warts and all, according to that, not trying to be perfect, not trying to say that I'm perfect, just trying to live the best, highest timeline, choosing those higher vibrations that Fred mentions, the 500, 400, 500, 600 vibrations, love, peace, gratitude, joy, service to others. If I do that, and I'm not trying to control, and I'm not trying to point fingers, and I'm not trying to judge, then at least for me, for my little space on the planet, that one thing that I can control is my own choice, then at least I'm doing my part to help raise that overall vibration. And that, to me, is our biggest individual contribution. And if anybody or anything is keeping you from exercising that freedom to your fullest, I would highly suggest you look at the value of that situation. Or the lack of value. Do you really want to keep choosing that? Or do you unapologetically want to follow your own highest path yourself? And then when I look around and somebody is not following that kind of path, don't judge. Just stay in my own higher ground space, be integrous with my own self, live in love, and listen to my own intuition for guidance. Then I'm creating that space for that person, not judgment, not sin. And I would just say, of those two choices, patriarchal control, judgment, condemnation, focusing on sin, versus choosing love, following your internal guidance, being in that wonderful exploration of, is this the monkey mind or is this intuition? And going into that and figuring it out. And know that if I just follow that highest guidance, it's going to take me to a good path. That, to me, is the best thing right now. All we can do. You've got you. Live your best you now. And I hope if you were a little bit pricked and offended by this, that at least it will be provocative. And forgive me for processing this out loud. But I just thought that there were some things here that we could all use in our own exploration and journey. Thank you so much for listening. I'm Thomas Miller. Enjoy the journey.